Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Gardner, Jared's Collaborations Manager, and I'm so happy to be with you all for JLive. JLive is Jared's virtual series bringing us together to explore and celebrate the diverse world of Jewish art, culture, and creative expression. In JLive Food, we're bringing you bite-sized conversations and cooking demos with the best Boston area chefs. In today's episode of JLive Food, I'm so happy to welcome Noah Clickstein, sous chef at Somerville's Juliet Company, and founding member of the culinary team and sous chef of Peregrine in Boston. You may recall Noah from this year's Beyond Bubbie's Kitchen, where he dished out so many delicious bites that his table was actually the first to run out. Today, he'll be showing us his unusual and really awesome take on not quite shakshuka. We'll have time at the end of the tasting for questions, so please share yours in the Q&A section below, and I'll ask as many as time allows. But for right now, take it away, Noah. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Sarah, and I want to thank everyone for joining in. I'm really excited to be able to share my recipe and my thoughts on shakshuka with you guys. First of all, this is an interactive conversation, so I expect to hear from everyone. How many people here have had or heard of shakshuka before? I guess we haven't made Zoom that interactive yet. Oh well. So I first heard and tasted it on my trip to Israel with my summer camp back in junior year of high school. I went to Camp Young Judea, go YJ, and every breakfast, they would always have these awesome buffets at the hotels that we would stay at, and shakshuka was my go-to because it filled my belly and it hit all the points that I wanted for breakfast. So I'm going to go a little bit through our recipe and talk a little bit about my philosophy when it comes to recipes. But the first thing, which is always very important when cooking, preheat your pan. So while that's heating up, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of shakshuka, because this is not shakshuka, as a lot of people might know. Shakshuka was originally a dish that no one knows where it originally came from. It has its origins with the Ottoman Empire, and as the Ottomans started to take over more of the Mediterranean, including the northern African areas, the people displaced from that, moving back up to Israel, brought with them this stew of tomatoes and combined it with the Ottoman recipe for Shakshuka, which is the precursor to what we know. And they added a little egg on top, poached in, which is the key part for the recipe that I'm going to make for you guys today. Okay, so there are a few main components in here. I have some vegetables, some onions, some cabbage. My unpaid interns took care of all my cutting for me. The tomatoes. Here I have a little tomato sauce made with tomatoes that I grilled and just pulverized. And a spicy component. This is where I went a little off recipe, and I have some spicy som sauce from David Chang's recipe for bosom. And of course, an egg. So the first step is going to be to sweat some of the vegetables. I have onions in here, my cabbage, something else I forgot to mention, a little garlic. All of this is just whatever you have laying around in your fridge. A little olive oil. And when it comes to sweating, that means two things for us. Some salt, and I'm turning the heat down to low and covering the pan. Now, just gonna let this cook down for a little bit. And also tell you guys why I want to make shakshuka, and it's not just from remembering it from Israel, but there was a time when I started cooking at Juliet Company, before we were Company, back when it was just Juliet, in Union Square, Somerville. I had joined the team and was working as a server for a few months before I got to work in the kitchen. And it was my first week when I finally joined the kitchen team, that one of the chefs, either Josh, who's one of our owners, or Rachel or Will, the chefs at the time, asked, "Hey, Noah, can you make family meal for us?" Now, for those that don't know what family meal is, it's that meal that all the staff at a restaurant gets to enjoy before dinner service, allowing us a chance to sit, take a deep breath, center ourselves, and eat some food. But for young cooks that are asked to make it, it's kind of nerve-wracking. You're put on the spot with ingredients that you don't know as well, or scraps from the day's preparation. And you have to cook for these accomplished people, these well-trained chefs, people that have very discerning palates. So there's kind of a lot of pressure going on with that. Now, I have remembered someone, and I want to credit Chef Will for this, mentioning the word shakshuka or something about lots of tomatoes for a stew. And that's what clicked for me, being that I should make some shakshuka, because it was something that I was like deep within me. So I just grabbed a bunch of our extra tomato sauce, some vegetables, did what I'm doing here, and then cracked a few eggs in, turned the heat off, and left a cover on, and we had our dish. And it was perfect for family meal because it had protein and all the vegetables that you wanted, and we served it with some brown rice for some complex carbs, everything that we really want for family meal. So now that it's cooked down a little bit, you can see the water starting to be released. This wouldn't be considered fully sweated. You can still see that the vegetables retain their shape, but personally, I like when vegetables have some crunch. So I'm gonna add my spice. Most people would know that this would be harissa that you traditionally add into shakshuka. But I like to combine flavors. And also I had this left over in my fridge. I've turned the heat up. I kind of want to reduce the sauce in here a little bit, really concentrating that spice and heat before I add all my tomatoes.
And so Noah, just a quick question while you're doing that.
Of course.
How spicy do you like your shakshuka? And for shakshuka beginners, how spicy do you recommend they start out?
That's a great question. I prefer pretty spicy, but I blame my dad for introducing me to Szechuan food for my love of spice. For those that are just starting and haven't had it before, I would just say add your spice in a very small increment, because you can always add more, but you can never take it away. Do you like spicy shakshuka, Sarah?
I do. I like my shakshuka with a little heat. I've only ever had it with harissa in it. And I was actually going to ask before you answered that question, you know, what is that original spicy heat? But I'm more of a back of the palate spicy kind of person versus like a really fiery spicy person. But I know that across our audience, I'm sure, and like definitely in my family, like spice ranges, so you never want to go too much too soon.
Absolutely. That's why I always have a little bottle of the hot sauce next to you for whoever wants to add more. So I'd like to point out that now that sauce that was very liquidy is reduced. It's not spilling all around the pan. So it's time for me to add my tomatoes. So I had a question earlier from someone that had emailed in asking about adding chunky tomatoes instead of a canned tomato sauce. And my response was that absolutely fine. There is no wrong addition as long as you enjoy the food that you're adding into it. The one thing that you want to keep in mind is that you want a little liquid, something to help create steam to cook your eggs after once you add them. So adding chunky tomatoes, absolutely fine, as long as you have a little liquid in there from either water, wine, cooking stock, or even cooking some of the tomatoes using that liquid and then adding fresh chopped tomatoes at the end.
Beautiful. And so what would you say? Say I only have tomato paste in my pantry. How could I get the ideal liquid ratio here?
You could add about a cup of water, but it really depends how much liquid to your pan. But whenever you add water, you could very easily substitute it for a flavored liquid like wine or vegetable stock or even meat stock.
Wow, so versatile.
Yeah. So now that it's come to a boil, I'm making a little indent, 2 little spots where I'm going to add my eggs, pushing the vegetables out of the way and creating a little well of the liquid. And whenever we do eggs, at Juliet Company, it's salt and pepper. But I have a very controversial statement about that. I really hate black pepper. I never use it in my cooking.
Wow, that is controversial. I also have another potentially controversial question from one of our audience members. Could we use salsa instead of chunky tomatoes?
Yes, absolutely. You could adapt the salsa to whatever vegetables you have laying in your fridge, which kind of brings me to one of my favorite parts about cooking and recipes specifically, is that recipes are more of a template than they are some immovable scripture. That you never, once you understand the basics of why you're doing what you're doing, you can substitute anything, which is why I'm a cook and not a baker, because those rules do not apply to baking. But you could add salsa, you could add this Korean condiment, you could use chili, Szechuan chili oil, which I know has kind of been the other big thing during quarantine. So as long as you follow the basics of the technique for poaching in a little liquid, then you can't really go wrong.
That's awesome. Love that.
So I forgot to mention, once you put the eggs in, I covered it, but I lowered the heat. Instead of letting the stew kind of boil rapidly, I want to poach it gently, which is going to allow the texture of the egg to be the same all the way through, instead of a very firm white outside and the runny yolk.
Beautiful. I have another audience question for you. Unless you have another piece of history you want to share. One of our audience members asks, have you been back to Israel since your team trip? Do you draw inspiration from the current popularity of Israeli food?
I have not been back, unfortunately. It is something I would very much like to do. And I personally don't use it as my main bed of inspiration, but I'm a big fan of all of the Otto Lange books. And that has been my newfound love this summer. I find that those recipes adapt well to all the summer vegetables that we have going around. And they're very easy recipes to use within what I've been cooking during quarantine. But as a whole, it's been hard for me to try and cook Israeli food because it's hard for me to define what food is Israeli and what has been brought to Israel by all of the people that touch the land of Israel. And that's been something that I've struggled with in figuring out these past few years. But I would love to go back. And if anyone is watching from Israel and needs a personal cook, I'd be happy to share my Instagram and email. Give me a call.
Amazing. You heard it here first, folks. So we have another question actually as you pick the top up, and I wonder if we're actually about to say this, but how long do you poach the eggs for?
Should have put a timer on to tell you guys exactly. But like the recipe as a template, there's no one answer. I did this for around 3-4 minutes as I was answering that question, but it really depends how high you are having this boil, the depth of the pot, how like tight fitting your lid is. They all really play into how long to poach. But the best part is that you can keep checking and put the cover back on. Now, I love a nice runny yolk. So mine are probably at a medium, over medium right now. And that is the entirety of the recipe. Very, very easy, very simple, and such a filling meal.
Wow, and it seems like the variations are endless too. Like, do you have any other fun combinations that you particularly love when you're making shakshuka, either for you or for Juliet?
One of my favorites, I recently took a trip to Spain, which that has definitely influenced my cooking in the past year. We get this really amazing spice blend from La Boite in New York City called Salvador Number 19, which has every wonderful spice that you would imagine from Spanish cooking. There's saffron in there, there's paprika, there's a bunch of other peppers. So I really focused on my Spanish influences using that spice blend, eggplants, and spring onions to make a shakshuka recently.
I love that, especially as I'm a big lover of Spain myself, and that sounds so delicious too. Just like sort of like a paella mixed with a shakshuka all in one. But so, and I have a few more questions, and I'm conscious of time. So I'm going to ask you these, and then we can wrap up. How does your culinary career relate, if at all, to your Jewish identity? I know you spoke about Israel, but are there other ways that your Jewish identity comes out through your cooking?
Yeah, very much so. So for me, being connected to Judaism is equally tied to being connected to the Jewish people. And there's so much influence from all of the movement, post-diaspora around, and every place that our people touched, they brought foods and ingredients with them. And that's a mentality that I've taken with me. But an even bigger influence is the core of Judaism to me is one word, and that's why. Being Jewish is pretty cool because you can ask, why do we do this? Why have we done this? And why are we continuing to do this? And those are questions that are very important to be asking, and ones that I constantly ask about food. To me, food has such power, and I wouldn't have realized that without asking why.
That's so beautiful. And to that end, can you leave our audience with a challenge or an activity that they can take with them and do in this time? Perhaps asking why in certain ways. I don't know. I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, I would challenge them to get a kitchen that has some nice air conditioning. I would actually have a few challenges. That's the first. The second, everyone should be using these takeout containers that restaurants will give you specifically for soups for all your storage needs. I have them just stacked in my fridge. But my serious takeaway is that I challenge everyone to look at recipes not as immovable scripture, but as ratios and as templates, and to understand that not understanding a recipe shouldn't hinder you. That exploration and substitutions are why we have the food that we do now. If not, we would still be eating the same 5 dishes from 1,000 years ago.
Amen. I love that. That's great. So everybody go out there, experiment, try your hand at something new, and maybe substitute a bunch of stuff so it looks like something totally different. I love that.
And let me know what you do.
Oh, yes, and exactly. And also give Noah a follow at his Instagram handle, at hangrycorgi. I'll post it in the chat. Also give Peregrine a follow at Peregrine_Boston. And check out Juliet.com for all of the amazing things they're doing while we're all in quarantine. They have this awesome food zine called the Bean Zine that has tons of great recipes. I think this shakshuka recipe is in it, Noah, right? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So we created this just for people in quarantine. Our email list was sent out, those that they told us what they had in their pantries. And that's how we created the cooking magazine.
Amazing. Yeah. So everybody go to Juliet.com, download your copy. It's fabulous. And for our friends who are interested in our next JLives, feel free, please join us for our next JLive installments. Our next one's coming up on Monday, June 29th at 12 p.m. We have another amazing mosaic artist, Celia Kramer. And then Tuesday at 7 p.m., we have a really fun JLive music with Guy Mendelo. So don't miss those. And last but not least, as the JArts tagline says, let culture connect us. JLive and other JArts programs are not possible without your generous community support. So please consider donating if you like what you see. And the donate link is in the chat. But thank you all for joining us. Thank you again, Noah. Go off, have your shakshuka, and have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you all.